I still remember like it was yesterday. It was a hot and humid day in a small little town called Luang Prabang, right by the Mekong River in Laos. The heavy air was filled with curry spices and the sweet smell of the earth right before it rains. I was rushing home from school. I remember it was right before it started storming. And I have this small little bicycle that was on the way home, and my mother was already waiting at home. Anxiously, I can see in her face, I knew something was up. She took me inside. She wrapped me a red and gold ceremonial shawl around me and one around herself as we were kneeling on the ground, getting ready to pray. In front of us was a Buddha statue and an offering tray that Mom has already arranged. 5 pairs of marigold flowers, 3 incense and 2 candlesticks and 2 cups of water. In our tradition, whenever we make this arrangement, it's a way of marking that moment a sacred moment. At that moment, what was sacred for my family, my parents in particular, came in a form of a passport that Mom and Dad has been working on to send me to the United States. As Mom was crying in joy and in tears, she closed her eyes and started to chant words of gratitude to the Buddha and to the earth, asking for protection for her son. I was so distracted and confused. I opened my eyes and saw the face of the Buddha, distracted by one simple question. Why were Mom and Dad so happy to send me away? I was 12 years old. The answer to that question came bright and clear after witnessing my parents suffering for the past 19 years. My mother and father missed all 19 of my birthdays in the past 19 years. They missed my graduation at Aycock Middle School. They missed my graduation at Page High School in Greensboro. They missed my graduation at NC State University. They missed my master's degree graduation at Dublin at Trinity College. They missed knowing my hopes and dreams, my fears, my insecurities. They missed knowing the names of my best friends. They missed being there for me during my first heartbreak, letting me know that things were going to be okay. I miss many of their life sacred moments too. I miss celebrating them in all of their life achievements. I miss all 10 years of my dad battling a sickness. I miss being there for my mother that became his caretaker. I miss being there in person to let them know that they made the right choice, that I was okay, and that they were my heroes. Laos' complex and difficult political past was one of the reasons why it was so hard for Mom and Dad to come to the United States. From 1964 to 1973, we dropped more than 2 million bombs on Laos. To put in perspective, that is about the size of an airplane of football-sized bombs dropped on Laos every 8 minutes, 24 hours a day for 9 years. I still remember growing up, my parents would tell me stories that my grandmother would dig a hole large enough to put her 5 children under the ground for 9 years so that they can hide from airplanes. Mom and her siblings would come out at night just to eat and to bathe. When my sister and I decided to open Bida Manda right here in downtown Raleigh, it was one of the first Laotian restaurants in the country. Even though food and hospitality are central to what it means to be a Laotian person, you often find Laotian families open Thai or Chinese restaurants because it was easier and less complicated to hide ourselves behind a cuisine that's less controversial and a portrait that's more familiar. For many Laotian American families, the war in Laos did not end in Laos. The war stripped away dignity, pride, and personal stories. Opening a Laotian restaurant for my sister and I was an opportunity to tell our story, our Laotian American story, the story of immigrants, to highlight the beauty of our cuisine and culture. But during those early years, even though our attempt was to tell our story stopped at it being beautiful. I was afraid to share the complexity and the wholeness of my personal story. I was scared that if I tell too much, I would be exposed to all the complexities that come with my story. I didn't want to be seen as weak or emotional. My fear of openly sharing the wholeness of my personal story was not only because of Laos' complex political past. I was insecure about my community knowing more about my spirituality, my sexuality, my political beliefs. I guarded all of my insecurities so that the story can just be about beauty. My life and the life of our business changed when I went back to Laos exactly this time 3 years ago. I went back to Laos to become a monk in order to cremate my grandmother, who was 105 when she passed away. Metao was her name. She was my main caretaker when I was growing up because mom and dad were so busy with work. In our tradition, it is believed that when the body passes on, that the spirit enters a journey. And the journey starts at an empty, lightless road. And the only way for the spirit to find directions is through the positivity and good being done by family members and the community that is still living behind. And becoming a monk was one of the ways to collect spiritual currency in order to contribute to that glowing lantern, giving my grandmother some sense of direction. It is also believed that the body rests still for 7 days before passing on, giving an opportunity for family members and the community to mourn, grieve, celebrate around the casket. Surrounding my grandmother's casket was a garden of roses and white lilies and burning incense and candles, and not all rituals are religious. Also surrounding her was stories that were exchanged by her 5 children, stories from her friends, close friends, and the hardships that they went through over the war. Also surrounding her casket was the smell of her favorite dishes that my aunt was preparing for us that evening. These living traditions were rituals performed for my grandmother, sending to her love, light, and helping her transition to the next stage. While grieving and reflecting on my grandmother's life and the rituals surrounding her death, I also arrived at my own reflection and a realization that who I am today as a friend, as a business owner, and as a person is still rooted in her stories, my parents' stories, and my personal stories. When I returned to the United States, here to Raleigh, I made a choice to publicly share the complexity of my personal stories. I wrote an article that was published called A Letter from Laos, the Mother of Life. The choice to share and integrate my personal story with my professional and personal life was really a part of my healing process. It wasn't an intentional choice. What I didn't realize was how much my vulnerability would become such a powerful source of connection for others to tell their stories and to connect with me. The moment of openly sharing my grandmother's death has led to a fruitful journey of vulnerability and a quest to live a life of openness. From wanting to protect my personal stories from the public and professional life, I have come to believe in the power of sharing our personal truth. At our company, our journey of vulnerability has led to be transparent and deliberate about issues that we care about. This journey has led us to work closely with the United States Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, hiring, training, and empowering refugees from Burma. It also led us to be really deliberate about involvement politically, locally, and nationally about issues concerning and relevant to our staff. Over the past 5 years, our small 22 restaurants has employed over hundreds families and served over 500,000 meals. Along with having a remarkable team, I'm convinced that the reason why Bida Manda is successful and has become a safe gathering place for our staff and our guests is not because just the food. It's because of the openness of our stories. This past November, Mom and Dad, after 7 years of working on a visa, was able to come visit for the first time. I still remember Mom and Dad arrived at RDU, And her first request was making sure that she visits Bida Manda's kitchen. And when she got to our kitchen, she got on the ground, arranged 5 pairs of flowers, 3 incense, 2 candlesticks, and 2 cups of water. And she started chanting and praying, thanking to the earth and the Buddha for protecting her children over these years. That was the first story we told after they landed. By being open, we expose ourselves to the possibility of being critiqued, judged, ostracized, hated. But we also open ourselves up to the possibilities of being heard, seen, and understood. Being vulnerable involves risk, but I believe that the risk of being critiqued and the fear of being ostracized is far smaller than the possibility of being seen and real, genuine human connections. I have come to believe that when we choose to live a life of openness, when we choose to be brave and expose our insecurities, our fear, our concerns, our hopes and dreams, our life becomes an invitation for others to do the same. By openly sharing, we are validating our truth to be true. But that's not only the thing that we are validating, we are also validating the truth that others carry too. In a world where there are endless opportunities to be divided, I invite you to tell your own personal stories, your own insecurities and fears and hopes and dreams. Because perhaps by sharing and telling our stories and listening the most caring way we know how is really the only way we can arrive at empathy together. Thank you.